back to the Angletopia podcast. This week, we're going to have a fun discussion on transatlantic relationships with expat entrepreneur Ben Elman, founder of datingacrossthepond.com, formerly known as Date British Guys. Datingacrossthepond.com is an online dating website dedicated to finding love around the world. Founded by Ben in New York, we have known Ben for years and they're longtime sponsors of Angletopia under the old Date British Guys banner. This episode of the Angletopia podcast is actually sponsored by Dating Across the Pond in celebration of the launch of their new dating platform. And while Ben chose the topic, we have full editorial control, and our plan is to have a fun discussion on this topic. We're going to talk about the history of his website, how it got started, and transatlantic dating in general. And now, as a happily married man, this is a topic I know absolutely nothing about. So I'm excited to learn how Brits and Americans are different when it comes to dating. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
So, Ben, give us some background. Tell us about the history of Date British Guys and how it got started.
Well, some of your audience may be familiar with this, but basically, about in 2009, I had been thinking about building a dating community since I was like 20 years old. But around the time that I was getting married to an American, it just sort of led to a whole bunch of relationships happening at the wedding. So like a bunch of her friends, this is my ex-wife, her friends got together with some of my friends and my family, and it just kind of like became obvious that there was like demand from Americans for Brits. And so one thing led to another, and we decided, you know what, let's just make a website and let's see what could happen. And that led to us getting a whole bunch of press really quickly. And we didn't really have the website perfectly built. That, it was just about working, and we just had a community that we just started. And then suddenly we just had like all this attention in the space of like 2 weeks. And that attention basically sustained the business for, well over a decade. And then basically we decided to pivot the business in order to go onto the App Store and build an Android app. Because basically the business itself, it sounds a bit sexist because it's Date British Guys, but of course, like we had people of all backgrounds that were members. But we had to change the name, and we decided to pivot to be a more global audience. And so we shifted to being Dating Across the Pond, which is still basically like 90% Brits and Americans. But it also means, hey, if you want to meet someone from a different part of the world, and they are looking to meet someone from your country or your nationality, then this is a community for international travelers, basically.
It's fascinating. And yeah, like I said, you guys have been around for a long time. You've worked with Angletopia over the years. That's really interesting that you launched with a minimum viable product and got success right away. And it was like a nonstop freight train, as we like to say here in America.
With all of the challenges, somehow the business stayed alive, and like people kept on coming back, and there was always like this demand, from people in not just the US, like outside of the US, all over the world, really, seeking British men and seeking British people. And so like even if we messed it up a bunch of times, like people kept on coming back and kept on keeping it alive. Much like you'd kind of imagine like any community that wanted to stay together. So it was actually kind of really amazing watching, at this point we've had about 200,000 people come through the platform. And it was always an issue getting men, because I think they, either the name of the website was off-putting or confusing to them, like Date British Guys. So why would a guy join unless they were gay, right? To join a Date British Guys website. So that was part of the issue, I think. And also it was like, hey, is this for real? Is there really a website where there's like more women than men in this platform? But like, fortunately, the numbers are not ridiculous in one side or the other, and somehow it's sustained the community.
It's super interesting to hear you say that, because we had a very similar like trajectory where we built this community that has sustained itself over a long period of time, and it's become its own organism almost. So like you said, you recently rebranded and now it's Dating Across the Pond. So tell us about the new platform. What's different than the old version? You said you're going to have an Android. Are you going to have an iOS app as well?
Yeah. So I think whenever anyone thinks of a dating platform, they think of a dating app, and I completely understand that. And we've been pursuing different technology partners over the last 10 years, really like 12 years. And each time, we've had some issues with it. But what we've done, and I think what really differentiates this from Date British Guys, is we've tried to really not only build a really slick professional system that is going to work well, whether it's desktop, whether it's tablet, whether it's mobile phone. The actual apps will be coming out about 6 months after the desktop version, and but the experience won't really be that much different versus the two. But the big difference is we really wanted to build more credibility into international dating. Like, we obviously have some credibility, but it's still a thin credibility because, like, the idea of dating someone from another country, I think it concerns people. It's like, well, I don't know, it's a long way, it's a lot of money. Like, are they real? And so we really wanted to make sure credibility was like a central part of this. And obviously, we've been in the news. We've got credibility in terms of we were in the New York Times, we were in the BBC News, we were in Time.com. We've had a lot of that press. But we wanted to make it so that when you're on the platform, you feel like there's more credibility. So what we've done is we've introduced something that no other dating platform has at the moment, which is video interviews. So we have this software basically built into the website where you click a button and then it will ask you a series of questions. There's like a pool of like 200 questions, and it will randomly ask you a question. And if you don't like it, you can skip it. But if you do like it or you're willing to answer it, then you can record up to a minute or a minute and 15 seconds of your answer. And I think this is going to really differentiate from most of the other players out there, because you can really get to know someone from hearing their voice and seeing them on camera.
Oh, that sounds really neat. That you kind of answered my next question, which is what makes this service different from other dating websites. So what else in addition to that video interview is kind of different?
Well, I think when you look at most international dating, you have to remember like that the competition out there for the most part obviously you've got the big players like Tinder, for example, and Bumble allow you to change your setting to be in another country. But that doesn't mean that the people you're seeing are particularly interested in people from your country or people from your nationality. So it doesn't really serve the purpose. It allows you to search in France, for example, or it allows you to search in Costa Rica. But these people aren't particularly looking for Brits, or in this case, when people come on our platform, the Brits are specifically looking to meet Americans, or they're specifically looking to meet Canadians. So I think one of the things that differentiates us is that the other websites out there and apps that do international dating have got bad reputations, because if you, I've tested out all of these like I want to know my competition, right? And what you find when you go on these other platforms is they're just like not real people. There's so many like, mail order bride platforms, right? There are so many sort of scammer platforms where everyone's free, on the female side, but like the guys have to pay. And obviously we were the other way around. For a long time, we had like free men in the UK, and we charged people outside of the UK, which, wasn't fair, but we had to do it because we needed to attract more men to the platform. So I think where we're different from these other international dating platforms is just that they're just not trustworthy. There's just, you get a poor experience. You just get harassed by these models, male or female or any gender, and they suck people in. And it's just kind of like, unfortunately, there's just not a lot of trustworthy places at a global level that cater specifically for international connections. And obviously, we're also not a marriage brokerage. Like, our goal is not to get you a green card or get married. Our goal is to connect people, to have romantic relationships, to fall in love, and whatever that may be in the end as to where you end up living, that's up to you. But we want to create a platform which is like centered around love and centered around relationships. It's what I believe in. It's my, I went through this myself. I've met, you know, I've met people online. Like I was in a relationship with my ex-wife. We were together. That was the beginning of this website, Date British Guys, and we were together for 17 years. And sadly, it didn't work out. But we have a beautiful child that came out of it. His name's Teddy. And I have absolutely no regrets about that. And maybe we were a bit young, but when we got together, but in the end, like I- I've I've seen the benefits of being in relationships with people from different countries, and it's a fascinating experience. And I've learned so much new things from the different places and the different people that I've been in relationships with. And now I'm dating a beautiful Hungarian lady who's based out here in the US, and she's also got French nationality and she's American citizen. And there's a lot of people like that in the world that have a desire and a need to be living and working in different places.
So speaking of trust and safety, so how does the new platform manage that? Trust and safety is so important when you're trying to meet people online. So what do you guys do that's different?
I think this is a difficult one, right? This is a difficult one. We have certain levels of verification when you join. So there will be a location verification you'll go through when you join. But that's just like a one-time thing. We don't track your location all the time, but we do say, okay, well, you need to verify your location. You need to verify through your phone. So there's like a text message that will come to your phone when you join. So there's that sort of tier of verification. We also have a photo verification where you'll have to like put up your hand or make a funny face or whatever, very similar to like the way Bumble does it. So in that sense, if you just that eliminates the people that are just taking photos off of the internet and creating a profile, because now we're expecting you to actually do a special hand gesture or whatever. So between the location map, between the photo verification, and the well, there's also if you're going to pay. So this is, I'd say, probably the largest verification we have is the paywall. So this is a bit of a controversial thing in the online dating community because there's so many platforms that offer free service, and then maybe they offer an upgrade facility for like people that use it a lot. But when you've got millions and millions of members, that makes sense as a business model. But when you've got hundreds of thousands of members, it doesn't make sense to offer completely free service, because you're just constantly dealing with scammers. You're constantly dealing with fake users. Like wherever, I always like to say that, think of a nightclub that has free entrance, you know, versus a nightclub that actually like you have to pay to go in. You're going to get people that are a little bit more serious. You're going to eliminate a lot of the garbage just by having a paywall. And so from a security standpoint, because you asked me about security, if they're paying, they have to use a card. And if that card is going to be attached to their phone, it's going to reduce the risk factor by a massive amount. Obviously from an activity standpoint on the platform, it does reduce some of the activity, but it increases the quality of the members. It increases the security. So you can feel confident that on Dating Across the Pond, anybody who actually messages you will have paid. And so that eliminates, most of the problems that we face.
Interesting. That's super interesting to hear. Um, so can you, I was browsing the website over the weekend just to prepare for this interview, not looking for a new partner, very happily married to Mrs. Englesopia. So can you tell us some success stories of people who found partners on the old and new service?
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, like when this episode goes out live, the new service will be fully functioning. But right now there's a bridge happening between Date British Guys and Dating Across the Pond. So Date British Guys, as we're recording, is still in action, but as it will come live, it will no longer be. Uh, but yeah, we have a few success stories on the homepage, so anyone can check that out. On Dating Across the Pond, you can click on success stories. We actually the last 5 success stories that we've had, we have created video interviews with them. I always wanted to do video interviews. I think in my head, I thought I'd actually go and see them and like, do some kind of documentary thing. And in the end, we just never got round to doing it. And so we would previously have people send in photos of them getting married or like just them together, and then they would tell us their story and we'd interview them over email. And so if you go on the Date British Guys website, you will see about 12 years worth of success stories. And obviously, not everybody that falls in love is going to tell us that they want to be featured on the success story page. Personally, I would be hesitant to do it because I don't want to like give it the kiss of death, right? Tell everyone how happy I am, and then something goes wrong. But people did do it, and you can see there's probably 4 or 5 success stories every year would publish. So you can imagine if there's 4 or 5 people willing to tell their story, there's probably another 400 or 500 people that don't really want to publish it but are still matching up. But they're from all backgrounds, and so the most recent are on video. There's like half an hour interviews with each couple, so you can really listen to those videos and hear about all the challenges they faced and the ups and downs. And like more recently, there was a story that one of these videos was about a female journalist who was in England a lot for work, and she had a real British sense of humor. I think that's something that a lot of Anglophiles have in common, is they really appreciate British humor, and they don't always expect the joke to be spelled out to them, and they appreciate sort of some dark humor occasionally where it's like on the edge of acceptable, might be cancelled in 5 years' time when people don't really understand the inner workings of the joke. But in her case, her friends explained to her that like maybe she should look outside of her network because there just wasn't enough fish in her pond. I know that's like the connection really to the name Dating Across the Pond, because like there are only so many fish, in your local community, in your local pond. And I think at some point you just say, well, what do I do when I run out of those people? Do I go look for people in the next town? And it's like, well, if it's already going to be an inconvenience and you're going to have to travel an hour to go, and if you're saying, well, I'll just make it bigger search area, yeah, but like it's still going to be impractical for you to go and date that person if they're an hour away or 2 hours away. Like, so it's just as impractical to meet someone who's 1,000 miles away, in my opinion. And so therefore, like, why not cast the net wider and actually chat with people from places that you're really interested in, you've been to before? And that's basically what she did. So she connected. She just someone. I think she looked it up on Google, and somehow we appeared on the first page under British Guys. And then the next thing she knows, she's chatting with a guy, and I think she had a few different guys she was chatting with, and then one thing led to another, and he, I think, flew out, or she flew out, and then they went back and forth. This is kind of what happens. It doesn't happen overnight. And actually, that's a kind of a nice little other element of international dating, is like you pretty much can't meet someone tonight or tomorrow. So when you talk about safety and security, like that's a big safety thing right there. Like you end up having to get to know them, because you can't, unless you happen to be in England tomorrow or you happen to be in New York or whatever tomorrow, you're probably not going to meet these people immediately. So I think what's kind of nice about it is that you end up being forced into this like back and forth chat for a long time, maybe a week or 2 weeks, and then suddenly you're onto video and you're chatting on video with this person, and then you're making phone calls, and it's like 5 hour difference or a 6 hour difference or a 4 hour difference. And it's just a very different way of forming a relationship. And in some ways it's the way it used to be, maybe without the video part. But like you met people, you had phone calls with them, you went out on a date maybe with them after a week or something. And there was just a slower, more kind of chivalry, romantic kind of process that came out of it. And I think, like, not that we planned it like that, but that's kind of the story we hear time and time again.
It's very similar to how Mrs. Angletopia and I started out. We met on our first day of college in Chicago, but we didn't live near each other. We both lived in different places that were near Chicago. And so we only saw each other once a week in class, but the whole rest of the week we were online on Instant Messenger talking back and forth and just sending emails, back in, when email was the only way you could communicate.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. It's, I think people are getting really tired of dating apps because there's this instantaneous feeling of like, oh, I've met someone, oh, there's interest. And then of course you're like let down because the person ghosts you, or the person just like is chatting to six other people at once, or there's like an expectation that you should like see them this weekend because you've been connecting with them, but then you don't hear from them. And it's just the speed of how people are meeting. It's like going to the grocery store and like picking this item or that item. It's become more of a consumable experience rather than like a fun romantic experience. Whereas when you met somebody, when you met your partner at university or college, the connection, of course, you met over, you connected eyes and you chatted, and that was like a beautiful way to meet. And I think everybody, almost everybody I've ever met, would rather meet that way than meet through a platform or meet through an app. So, but if that doesn't happen, then you want to use a service that actually like gets you as close to that chemistry as possible. So I think the problem is these dating apps now, they've made it so convenient. It's like picking which pizza you're going to order from tonight. And I think that that's just led to it's taken some of the romance out of it. It's taken some of the um, getting to know you out of it. It's just like more like efficiency. Like, I'll just meet three guys tonight, or I'll meet three girls tonight, and I'll see which one I like the most, and then I'm going to move on to the next stage. So I think unfortunately there's going to be a big pullback away from dating platforms. I think there already is, and so hopefully our community hasn't become that and won't become that. So that's
Yeah, that's why yours is different. Like you said, you've got this video interview process. Somebody has to pay to message back and forth. That's a lot of steps that a lot of people aren't willing to make if they're only doing this casually. So the people that you're attracting to this website are more deliberate and clear in what they're looking for, which makes a great tool for dating, I would guess.
Yeah, and I would say like we don't want to put too many barriers up. Obviously, if we make too many barriers, we're only going to get people that are super serious or like, they just absolutely can't find anybody in the world and now they're coming on this platform. Like the video interviews are you don't have to be a paid member to do the video interviews. That's the one thing we wanted to make sure we could do. But you do have to be, in order to watch other people's videos, you need to have a video interview yourself. So in a way, like if you're concerned, like, oh my goodness, I don't want to record myself. What am I going to say? I think like generally the idea of uploading a video has never worked when it comes to internet dating. I think other people have tried it and it hasn't worked. We tried it many years ago. Like who wants to upload a video of themselves? What's my background going to be? What am I going to say? But if you're interviewed, it's a bit different. And what we've found from testing is people are comfortable being interviewed because like you're going to throw the question to me. I'm just going to answer it however I can. And if I don't like it, I can obviously delete it and go and do another one. So that experience, I think, is going to make it easier. But no one will be able to watch that unless they have either paid or they've uploaded their own. They've completed their own video interviews. So I think that will make it like I think people that use our platform are a bit more serious than the people that are using all these free dating apps. And honestly, I've had people say to me, "Oh, why do we have to pay?" And I just say, like, well, A, it's a business, right? And like, we can't keep this thing going. We can't keep the community going unless there's some revenue, right? And then it's like, well, why don't you just use ads? And I'm like, I hate ads. Like, I don't know anybody that likes having to watch ads or just having ads thrown at them all the time. And on top of all of that, if you're talking about dating someone from another country, right? Like you're interested in whatever, you're interested in Brazilians, right? You're interested in Indians, you're interested in whatever. You're going to have to pay money for flights. You're going to like this is not going to be a cheap relationship. Like no, I know this is probably going to sound terrible, but like you are interested in someone from England, you're interested in someone from America, you are going to spend hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars, on flights, hotels, and all of those other things. What do you care about $34, right? To meet that person, to actually find someone real. And I just think it's like a ridiculous argument. And I know that probably sounds like lofty, like, oh, I don't, money's not an issue or anything. But it's like, there has to be some kind of like line where like people who are actually legitimately thinking about meeting someone from another country are going to actually meet them. And what I don't want is for people to waste their time. I don't want our members to just have people chatting with them and it's never going to go anywhere. So yeah, if you come on our platform and you pay this money, everybody has to pay. And so either there'll be no activity or there'll be tons of activity. But at least you know when an email comes in or a notification comes in, it's from a real person. And I think that experience alone is probably where we separate the most from most of the competition out there, is that when you get a message from someone on our platform and you open it and it actually has a message in there, you're most likely going to have a nice conversation, because also you cannot talk to anyone unless you've matched with them. So it's not like 100 guys can just message you. You have to have already said you like those guys before they would even be able to message you in the first place. So it just elevates the quality of the experience. And I think it makes it a safer environment, which is really important for me. I have another life as well. In addition to running this network, this community, I also am I'm a business coach. I'm a psychologist. I teach at university, so I have a life that is parallel to this business, and so my reputation, it does matter to me, and in terms of like what I associate with, and my goal is to create this global network that is incredibly built. The people that have actually built the community and the platform that will also be doing the Android and the iOS, they're a US government contractor for IT. So we have, people behind this platform that really care about privacy, really care about compliance, really care about security, and also believe in our mission.
Well, and the issue of pricing that you mentioned, I would agree with that. People will happily pay for something that brings them joy and entertainment and quality. And I think you're on the right track there. So shifting focus, we've talked about the platform and everything, and we will link to it in the show notes. Let's shift focus to talking about transatlantic dating and the difference between dating in the UK versus the US. And so, what are some fundamental cultural differences in dating between the UK and the USA? How are things different? What jumps out at you?
I think a lot of the things I'm going to say have really been from what I've heard from other people, because I got into a relationship when I was 25 and didn't come out of that relationship until I was 41, right? So I'm 44 now. Um, so I know a little bit about dating in my 40s because I went through that in the last few years, and that was in the US, and that was with a few different people. But what I can say is, like, before I met my ex-wife, I was in relationships in London, and they were mostly with people from different parts of the world. So even back then, back in the early 2000s, because I lived in London, I think anybody who lives in a major city around the world is going to meet people from different countries. And so, when you ask the question of like, what is the difference? I would just say, if you date someone who's from your own country, it is going to be significantly different than if you meet another person, even they're in your same country, right? But they're from somewhere else, and they bring that different culture. Like, I remember the first girlfriend, well, maybe not the first girlfriend, one of my first girlfriends, trying to remember which country she was from, because she might have been from Italy. I dated an Italian girl, definitely dated an Italian girl once, and that was a very unique experience. Like, she was always expecting, she wanted more drama in the relationship. She was like, Italian men are, they're just more loud, and they want more of an argument, and there's like much more of an expectation around drama. And I was like, look, I'm British, you know, like, I don't like a lot of drama. We like to kind of like keep our emotions under the rug a little bit. So just there, it was my sort of first entrance into what is it like to date someone from somewhere else. And American women are different as well from from Italians, and I think the other girl that I was thinking about was from Iran, um, and but I didn't really date her long enough to really know what that culture was like. And I dated a girl from India once, in London, and that was different too, because she had a very traditional community. And I think long term she was probably going to end up with someone who was Indian living in London. But I got a different experience with her. And then when I was dating an American and I ended up marrying an American, I really got a taste of American culture because I moved here, and of course I spent a lot of time with her friends and so forth. And I would say like the big difference between Americans and Brits in terms of dating was that I think in the US there's it's a little bit weird because of course we're talking about an American meeting a Brit. So there's like this, I wouldn't say fantasy, but there's more of a glorification of Brits in the US, as you know, which your platform, is a community about. But I think that that glorification kind of it creates this like extra bit of romance, much like when an Anglophile goes to the UK and it's a romantic experience for them to connect to that land for whatever their reason is. I think like British men in the US, they're sort of given this pedestal already where, and that does add pressure, I suppose, to the relationship. But there is this kind of assumption that it's going to be romantic. Whereas, when I hear about US couples meeting, they hope it leads to romance, but initially it's more about just chemistry and like convenience and friendship. And those are all important to have, I think, in a relationship. But I think that the American connection to the UK means that already, right at the beginning, there's this like goal of romance and love, and this sort of interest level is higher in the other person's culture. And I think that that's a dimension that you don't really get when you have within your own culture two people from your own culture. You know each other. There's just like old habits, good or bad. You bring the old baggage from that community with you. Like I always say, Brits are a bit pessimistic, and they're maybe they'd argue they're optimistic, they're realistic, excuse me. But I think in America, you have a lot of optimistic people. You have a lot of people that are excited by a different culture because pretty much everybody in America has come from somewhere else. And I think there's a real appreciation for other cultures in the US, even though many people don't leave the US. The people that are in it are usually from somewhere else, and everyone's a third Irish or 20% Italian or 50% British, and that just makes it a much more welcoming place for people of different backgrounds, I think.
George Bernard Shaw famously said that America and Britain were separated by a common language. How does this affect dating? What how do Brits communicate versus how do Americans communicate, and how does that lead to fun in the dating world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I can answer it perfectly because I haven't got a large sample of dating experience with lots of Americans, right? But but what I will say is that I think Americans are a bit more literal. I think when they say something, that's exactly what they mean. But when it comes to British, I think there's a lot of different meanings to what they're saying. You could say something. I mean, this is obviously communication is not just the words you say, it's your body language and it's your tone. So those are elements all over the world. But I think in the UK, you can say the same thing in 10 different ways, and it could mean at least 5 to 10 different things. And I think that in America, they are much like whatever they say is what they mean, usually. There's there's not a lot in between the lines with Americans because they've taken the language from the British, and they've said, you know what, some of this language doesn't make any sense. Like, let's just streamline it. Let's just keep it simple. And apart from like obviously the pronunciation differences of certain words and certain misunderstandings around terminology, like for example, if I said to you, if I came to your house and I said your house is homely in the US, how would you respond to that? How would you feel? What am I saying about your home?
I'd take it as a compliment.
You would take
Can
it
you
as a
hear me?
compliment. Okay. And what if I say
Yeah,
it's homey? Is
take
there
it
any
as a compliment
difference?
too. There is a
Okay, you take that
difference.
as a
Yeah,
compliment. But if you look it up, there is a difference, right? Because I said someone said this to me in the US, and my mom would say it to me in the UK. And like in the UK, um, if you say something is homely, people think of warm and like nourishing and like kind of family time festivities, just like a nice place to be. But in America, like the reaction I got was like, that's a negative thing to say about someone's home. So there are some like silly little small word differences that can be, can lead to people not understanding each other. But at the end of the day, like we're the same. We're still speaking English, whether it's American English or British English. I would say maybe the comedy is a bit different. Like you have to explain, you have to really be sure the punchline is out there and explained. Not in all American humor, but I think anyone listening who's an Anglophile will relate to this. Like you watch British humor and it's what's not said that is really funny. And it's where it could be two meanings. And that's funny. And I think like in a way, like Seinfeld gets that in the US and obviously like Curb Your Enthusiasm, right? Like those are written by the same person. But that's an example. And I suppose also The Office in the US, and there are some other comedians and TV shows that take the same approach. But I think that's a major language difference between the UK and the US. Is like this need to really explain and dumb down things. There's a much bigger audience in America, and so therefore it makes sense for them to want to dumb it down. They just don't want to lose any people. Whereas in the UK, I feel like they create a comedy or they have a conversation and they take more risk and they are willing to have people not understand them and they don't care because they're serving an audience. And in this case, there'll be British guys or British women or any gender that is communicating with people from America or Canada or anywhere else in the world. And they will use phrases that are not understood and they will say things that have multiple meanings. So in that sense, there could be some misunderstandings in the first kind of 6 months, I would say, until they're face to face and they can iron out some of those differences.
One thing I've learned talking to British expats is that they find that their accent gets them quite far in this country in the dating realm.
Yeah. And have you, what do you think it is about their accent that is giving them a leg up?
Probably because like it's depending on where you come from in Britain, you can sound like you're from a period drama, so it makes you sound upper class and proper and everything.
Do you know what? It's funny you say that. Right? There's a little story that comes to mind where my girlfriend and I were in London. We went to a friend of mine's wedding, and there was a guy there who I hadn't seen in a long time. And this guy, he had this, in my opinion, he had a posher British accent than me, right? And I always thought he was like so smooth. Like I always used to like admire this guy when I was at university, thinking like, oh, he's going to get all the girls, right? He's just like really like was reserved. I mean, he kind of checked a lot of boxes in terms of British stereotype, right? And I remember chatting with him, and I was with my girlfriend, and for like a second, I was thinking like, this guy, she knows me, but like, if she lived in England, she'd meet millions of Brits. And so, like this guy's obviously like got a smoother accent. He's like more, he's just he comes across as posher than me. And I remember afterwards chatting about it, I wasn't really like, I wasn't like threatened in the situation because we're very tight, my girlfriend and I. But it was just kind of a funny thing, and I really thought she would notice the difference, right? I really thought she would notice the difference between my accent and his accent because I could certainly tell the difference. But what I realized, and she said to me after, she's like, I mean, English accent, you know, like she couldn't tell the difference. And I'm sure some people can. Obviously, if you've got a lot of knowledge of the UK, you are going to pick up the different accents. But she didn't care and she couldn't tell the difference. So I think sometimes it's like in our heads as to like how powerful and how differentiated the accents are. Like I've met Americans who are as interested in Irish accents as they are Scottish accents, as they are Welsh accents, as they are different areas of England accents. They're just like, or even Australian, right? Or New Zealand. They're just curious. They want something different and they find it, there's some, it's not, I don't know whether it adds more, like it sounds more intelligent sometimes, or whether it's just different. and there's just something about it that's pulling people in. But these period dramas and these movies that have a British lead character, or the bad guy's British or the bad woman's British, right? Like those things are always helping us. Those sources of like British media appearing in America and influencing America, whether it's music or whether it's art, whether it's TV, whether it's film, those are not going to go away. And there's a reason why people continuously want people from this part of the world. And it's not just the accent. It is the culture behind the accent. It's the thought process, the attitude of Brits that I think comes out in the speech along with the accent. And in the end, it's about the character, the stereotypes around British people and their culture and their character and their integrity and their honesty and their bluntness. And I think their risk taking and those things I think are probably attractive to people from outside of the UK. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Some of us just love the accents, and I've over the years I've heard all most of the British regional accents, and I have my favorites. And it's funny, I was on a train journey with an Irishman a couple years ago, and one of the conductors on the steam train journey, it was like a day out thing where you're on a steam train all day. He was Scottish, and the my Irish guest could not understand what the Scottish guy was saying. And he's like, "Can you understand him?" I'm like, "Yeah, I understand him. I speak British person." I just thought it was hilarious that I could understand him, but he couldn't.
That's funny. Yeah, you must have watched a lot of Scottish TV then, or
Yeah,
traveled a lot in Scotland.
yeah, I love Scottish stuff, and Outlander is huge in the U.S. I don't know if it's big in Britain, but here it's created a whole industry, a whole Scotland industry.
Yeah, you have to have I think a lot of people have to put subtitles on when they're watching people from these parts of the UK that maybe their accent is a bit thicker. Like I remember growing up, and my dad was really into Rabsy Nesbitt, which I don't know if you are familiar with that comedian, that show. But this was like BBC Two, or I don't know, BBC, like maybe Channel 4, and it was like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, and there was an I'm sure it's still happening now, although I don't live in the UK anymore. But there are these fringe TV shows that are often hilarious, and they are created in these regions where mainly people from that region are watching it. And so they don't care if someone doesn't understand them. But that's the authentic nature of some of these TV shows. And whereas in the US, I mean, maybe those things exist on cable networks, but the chances of it getting on mainstream are really low. Whereas in the UK, like they are willing to give a pedestal to comedy and to art, and that is from a region where maybe you can't understand them very well, but you can always put on the subtitles.
Separated by a common language. George Bernard Shaw was right. Well, I think that's a great spot to wrap it up. Do you have anything else you'd like to share about dating across the pond or the new platform?
Sure. I mean, if your audience hasn't heard of this before, then please come and check us out. And if you're single, or if you know someone that's single, what have you got to lose? I think this is a community that is a family-run business, and we have thousands of members. So I hope that you give it a try. And if you are married and you've got absolutely no intention of using our platform, then hey, if you bump into someone that is interested in meeting someone from the UK or anywhere else in the world, please give us a thought and check out Dating Across the Pond.
Well, thank you so much for being on the Angletopia podcast, Ben, and thank you for sponsoring this episode. And we will put the link in the show notes, and we hope everyone has transatlantic dating success. So,
Yeah, and best of luck with the channel.
all right, thank you, Ben.
All right, take it.